The day started like any other in a quiet suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. The sun was shining brightly, and the air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. It was one of those days when everything seemed calm, almost too calm. Charles Johnson, a 65-year-old retired mechanic with a warm smile and steady hands, was enjoying the simple pleasures of life. His backyard was alive with laughter, music, and the smell of barbecue wafting through the air. He had invited his grandchildren over for a small family gathering, a chance to relax, share stories, and create memories. Charles's grandson, Marcus, was manning the grill, flipping burgers with the confidence of someone who thought he was a professional chef. His granddaughter, Jasmine, sat on the steps of the porch, scrolling through her phone while occasionally glancing up to laugh at her younger cousins chasing each other around the yard. Charles himself leaned back in a folding chair, sipping lemonade and watching the scene unfold. This was his happy place, his family together, safe and content. But peace, as it often does, can be fragile. A neighbor down the street, annoyed by the faint sound of music drifting from Charles's backyard, decided to call the police. They didn't know Charles or his family personally, but assumed the worst based on stereotypes they'd heard about: loud gatherings. Within minutes, Officer Kyle Bennett arrived at the scene, his patrol car pulling up to the curb with an unnecessary screech of tires. Kyle was a middle-aged man with a reputation that preceded him. He was known for his short temper and abrasive attitude, traits that made him unpopular among many residents of the neighborhood. Some whispered that he treated people differently based on their skin color, though no one had ever been brave or foolish enough to confront him directly. Today, however, would prove to be different. As Kyle stepped out of his car, he scanned the area with narrowed eyes. The music playing in the background wasn't loud enough to disturb anyone more than a few feet away, but Kyle didn't care. To him, this was a disturbance waiting to happen. He marched toward the driveway, his boots crunching against the gravel, and called out loudly, "Who's in charge here?" Charles stood up slowly, setting his glass of lemonade on the table beside him. He walked over to meet Kyle, his expression calm but wary. "That would be me," he said, his voice steady. "Is there something I can help you with, officer?" Kyle barely glanced at Charles before launching into a tirade. "I got a complaint about noise coming from this property," he barked, gesturing vaguely toward the house. "You need to turn that racket off right now." Charles blinked, surprised by the hostility in Kyle's tone. "Racket?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "It's just some music, sir. We're not bothering anyone." "You're bothering me," Kyle snapped, taking a step closer. "And if I say it's too loud, then it's too loud, got it?" Marcus, overhearing the exchange, turned off the grill and came over to stand near his grandfather. Jasmine also joined them, slipping her phone into her pocket as she sensed the tension rising. The younger kids stopped running around and stared curiously at the uniformed man standing in their driveway. "Look," Charles said, trying to keep his voice even. "We're just having a little family get-together. No trouble here. If you want, I'll turn the volume down even lower." "No," Kyle interrupted sharply. "I don't want excuses. Turn it off completely." By now, the entire family had gathered behind Charles, forming a loose semicircle. Kyle noticed this and frowned, his jaw tightening. "What is this?" he demanded, looking past Charles at the group. "Some kind of gang meeting?" Jasmine let out an incredulous laugh. "A gang? Seriously? We're literally barbecuing." Kyle shot her a glare. "Watch your mouth, girl. You're talking to an officer of the law." Charles raised a hand slightly, signaling for Jasmine to stay quiet. "There's no need for threats," he said firmly. "We're cooperating. Let me go inside and turn the music off." But Kyle wasn't listening anymore. Something about the way Charles spoke, the calm authority in his voice, irritated him. Maybe it was because Charles didn't seem intimidated. Or maybe it was something deeper, something rooted in prejudice that Kyle couldn't, or wouldn't, acknowledge. Whatever the reason, his frustration boiled over into anger. Before anyone could react, Kyle took 2 quick steps forward and shoved Charles backward. The older man stumbled, caught off guard by the sudden movement. Then, without warning, Kyle pulled his arm back and punched Charles squarely in the face. Time seemed to freeze. The world went silent except for the sharp intake of breath from Marcus and the collective gasp of the children. Charles staggered back, clutching his cheek, his glasses askew. For a moment he simply stood there, stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. Then chaos erupted. Marcus lunged forward, shouting, "What the hell are you doing?" Jasmine grabbed her phone and started recording, her hands trembling as she captured the scene. The younger kids began crying. Their joyful afternoon shattered in an instant. Kyle, realizing what he had done, hesitated for a split second. But instead of apologizing or backing down, he squared his shoulders and pointed a finger at Charles. "Don't play innocent with me," he growled. "You were being disrespectful. That's assault on an officer." Charles, still holding his cheek, shook his head in disbelief. "Assault?" he echoed weakly. "You hit me. And you deserved it," Kyle shot back, his voice rising. "If you don't like how things work, maybe you shouldn't have moved into this neighborhood." The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Even Marcus, who was usually quick to argue, found himself speechless. Jasmine, meanwhile, kept filming, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. She knew instinctively that this moment needed to be documented, not just for their sake, but for everyone who might never believe them otherwise. As Kyle continued to rant, oblivious to the camera rolling, Charles finally found his voice again. "This isn't right," he said softly, addressing no one in particular. "This isn't justice." His words were drowned out by the wail of approaching sirens. Someone, perhaps a neighbor, had called 911 after witnessing the altercation. Backup was on its way, though whether it would bring resolution or further conflict remained to be seen. For now, the Johnson family stood united, their faces etched with shock and anger. Kyle crossed his arms and glared at them, daring anyone to challenge him again. But deep down, beneath the bravado, he felt a flicker of unease. He didn't know it yet, but this single act of violence would set off a chain reaction that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone involved. Little did Kyle realize that Charles's son, Detective Ryan Johnson, was part of the SWAT team, and that this incident was far from over. The video of Officer Kyle Bennett punching Charles Johnson spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times on social media platforms, sparking outrage across Atlanta and beyond. People were shocked and angry, not just because of what they saw, but because it felt all too familiar. Stories of police brutality against black individuals weren't new, but this one hit differently. Here was a grandfather, minding his own business at a family barbecue, attacked without provocation by someone who was supposed to protect him. Detective Ryan Johnson first heard about the incident while sitting in his office at the precinct. A colleague walked in with a grim expression, holding out their phone. "You need to see this," they said quietly. Ryan took the phone and watched the clip, his heart sinking as he recognized his father's face. The calm demeanor he usually carried dissolved into a mix of disbelief, anger, and sorrow. He replayed the video several times, each viewing making it harder to breathe. For a moment, Ryan sat frozen, staring at the screen. Then he stood abruptly, grabbed his jacket, and headed straight for internal affairs. This wasn't just an attack on his father. It was an attack on justice itself. As a detective and a member of the SWAT team, Ryan knew how important trust between law enforcement and the community was. What Kyle had done shattered that trust, and Ryan intended to make sure it didn't go unpunished. When Ryan arrived at Internal Affairs, he found the room buzzing with activity. Investigators were already reviewing the footage, taking notes, and discussing next steps. Lisa Carter, a seasoned forensic expert known for her meticulous work, greeted Ryan with a sympathetic nod. "We're looking into this fully," she assured him. "But I won't lie, it's going to be complicated." Ryan nodded, though his jaw tightened. "I understand, but we can't let this slide. Not this time." Lisa agreed. "That's why we've already started gathering evidence. We'll need statements from your family, especially Marcus and Jasmine, since they witnessed everything. And we'll have to interview Kyle, too." "Good luck with that," Ryan muttered under his breath. He doubted Kyle would admit to wrongdoing willingly. Still, he trusted Lisa and her team to do their jobs thoroughly. As the day wore on, Ryan returned home to check on his father and the rest of the family. When he walked through the door, he found Charles sitting quietly in the living room, staring at the floor. His cheek was bruised, and his glasses hung slightly askew, but it was the look in his eyes that troubled Ryan most. It was a mixture of pain, confusion, and something deeper, something Ryan couldn't quite place. "How are you holding up?" Ryan asked gently, sitting beside his father. Charles sighed, shaking his head slowly. "I don't know, son. I keep thinking about what happened, why it happened. Was it something I did? Something I said?" "No," Ryan replied firmly, placing a hand on Charles's shoulder. "This isn't your fault. You were just living your life, enjoying time with your family. Kyle had no right to treat you that way." Charles nodded, though doubt lingered in his expression. "Maybe so, but it doesn't change the fact that it happened, or that people are watching us now, waiting to see what we'll do." Ryan understood what his father meant. The spotlight was on them, and the pressure to act was immense. Social media users had already dubbed Charles a symbol of resilience, sharing memes and hashtags like "Justice for Charles." Local news outlets were covering the story extensively, interviewing neighbors and activists alike. The attention was overwhelming, but it also gave Ryan hope. If enough people cared, maybe real change could happen. Over dinner, the entire family gathered to discuss their next steps. Marcus and Jasmine recounted the events leading up to the altercation, emphasizing how unprovoked Kyle's actions had been. The younger kids listened intently, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and confusion. Ryan explained that Internal Affairs was investigating the incident and that charges might be filed against Kyle. He reassured everyone that they were doing everything possible to ensure accountability. "We're not alone in this," Ryan said, looking around the table. "People care about what happened to Dad. They want justice just like we do." Jasmine nodded, clutching her phone tightly. "And we've got proof. That video shows exactly what Kyle did. There's no denying it." Marcus added, "Yeah, but we still have to testify. We have to tell our side of the story." Ryan appreciated their courage. Testifying wouldn't be easy, especially for Charles, who would have to relive the trauma in court. But Ryan knew it was necessary. Without their voices, the case might fall apart. "We'll get through it together," he promised. "One step at a time." The following morning, Ryan met with Maria Lopez, a local activist who had taken an interest in the case. She had organized protests outside the police station and reached out to the Johnson family to offer support. Over coffee, she outlined her plans to keep the issue in the public eye until justice was served. "Your father's story is powerful," Maria said passionately. "It resonates with so many people who've faced similar injustices. We need to use that momentum to push for systemic change, not just for Charles, but for everyone." Ryan agreed wholeheartedly. "That's exactly what I'm hoping for. Holding Kyle accountable is step one. Step two is making sure this never happens again." Maria smiled, impressed by Ryan's determination. "With you leading the charge, I think we have a good chance. Just remember, you're not alone in this fight." Back at the precinct, tensions were rising. Word had gotten out that Ryan was involved in the investigation, and some officers viewed it as a conflict of interest. Whispers followed him down hallways, and more than once he overheard colleagues questioning his motives. "He's only doing this because it's his dad," one officer muttered during lunch. Ryan ignored the comments, focusing instead on the task at hand. He reviewed witness statements, analyzed the video footage frame by frame, and prepared questions for Kyle's eventual interview. Every detail mattered, and Ryan refused to let personal attacks distract him. Kyle, meanwhile, remained defiant. When Internal Affairs called him in for questioning, he showed up with an air of arrogance, insisting that he had done nothing wrong. "I was just doing my job," he claimed, leaning back in his chair. "If people don't like it, that's their problem." His attitude infuriated Ryan, but he kept his emotions in check. This wasn't about revenge, it was about uncovering the truth. Patiently, Ryan asked Kyle to explain his version of events. listening carefully for inconsistencies. Sure enough, Kyle's story didn't match the video. When pressed, he grew defensive, accusing Ryan of bias and trying to ruin his career. "You're making me out to be the bad guy here," Kyle snapped. "But I'm not the one who disrespected authority. Your dad started it." Ryan clenched his fists beneath the table but maintained his composure. "The evidence tells a different story," he said calmly. "And whether you admit it or not, the truth will come out." By the end of the week, Internal Affairs had compiled enough information to recommend disciplinary action against Kyle. Though the final decision rested with higher-ups, Ryan felt a small sense of relief knowing they were moving in the right direction. Still, he knew the hardest battles lay ahead, especially when it came to convincing skeptical colleagues and earning back the community's trust. That evening, Ryan joined his family for another quiet dinner. As they ate, Charles spoke up, his voice steady despite the weight of recent events. "No matter what happens next," he said, looking around the table, "I'm proud of all of you. We're standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Ryan smiled, feeling a surge of pride himself. Justice wasn't easy, but it was worth fighting for. Together, they would see this through, one step at a time. The investigation into Officer Kyle Bennett's actions began the next morning. Internal Affairs set up a small team to review the evidence, including the viral video, witness statements, and any additional footage that might have been captured by neighbors' security cameras. Detective Ryan Johnson was asked to assist with the process, given his connection to the case and his experience in handling sensitive matters. Though it was unusual for someone so close to an incident to be involved, Ryan insisted on helping. He wanted to ensure the investigation was thorough and unbiased. Lisa Carter, the lead investigator, called Ryan into her office early that day. She had already gathered preliminary information and needed his input. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," she said as Ryan took a seat across from her desk. "This isn't just about what happened yesterday. It's about setting a precedent. If we don't handle this right, people will lose even more trust in the department." Ryan nodded. "I understand. That's why I want to be part of this. I need to make sure my father's voice is heard, but also that justice is done for everyone." Lisa handed him a folder containing the initial reports. "Start by reviewing these. We'll meet with witnesses later today, starting with your nephew Marcus and niece Jasmine. Their accounts are critical since they were there when it happened." As Ryan flipped through the documents, he noticed inconsistencies in Kyle's statement. According to Kyle, Charles had provoked him and resisted arrest, which led to the altercation, but the video clearly showed otherwise. Ryan clenched his jaw, frustrated by the blatant attempt to twist the truth. Still, he reminded himself to stay focused. Emotions wouldn't help. Facts would. Later that afternoon, Ryan met with Marcus and Jasmine at the precinct. They sat in a quiet interview room, the air thick with tension. Marcus looked nervous, fidgeting with his hands, while Jasmine clutched her phone tightly, as if it were a lifeline. Ryan gave them a reassuring smile before beginning. "Thank you both for coming," he said gently. "I know this isn't easy, but your words matter. Tell me exactly what happened. Start from the moment Officer Bennett arrived." Marcus spoke first, describing how Kyle had stormed into their driveway and immediately demanded that the music be turned off. "He didn't even give Grandpa a chance to explain," Marcus recalled, his voice shaking slightly. "And when Grandpa tried to reason with him, Kyle just got angrier. It was like nothing we said mattered." Jasmine nodded, adding, "And then he shoved Grandpa. Just pushed him back like he was nothing. After that, he punched him. We all saw it. There's no way to deny it." Ryan listened carefully, taking detailed notes. When they finished, he thanked them for their bravery. "You're doing the right thing," he told them. "This isn't just about Grandpa. It's about making sure no one else has to go through something like this." After the interview, Ryan returned to Lisa's office to share what he'd learned. Together, they reviewed the timeline of events and compared it to Kyle's version of the story. The discrepancies were glaring. Lisa sighed, leaning back in her chair. "This is going to be messy," she admitted. "Kyle's claiming self-defense, but the evidence doesn't support that. And with the video out there, it's only a matter of time before the public demands answers." Ryan agreed. We need to move quickly. The longer this drags on, the harder it will be to control the narrative. Meanwhile, protests continued outside the police station. Led by local activist Maria Lopez, hundreds of people gathered daily, holding signs that read "Justice for Charles" and chanting slogans like "No more abuse." Maria was a fiery speaker, known for her ability to rally communities around causes of social justice. She had reached out to Charles and his family, offering her support and vowing to keep the pressure on until accountability was achieved. One evening, Maria visited the Johnson household to discuss strategy with Ryan and his family. Sitting in the living room, she outlined her plans for a series of demonstrations aimed at keeping the issue in the spotlight. "We can't let this fade away," she said passionately. "What happened to your father is unacceptable, and we have to show the world that we won't stand for it." Charles listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. While he appreciated Maria's dedication, he worried about the potential for violence. "I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me," he said softly. Maria placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Your safety is our priority," she assured him. "But silence won't protect you or anyone else. We have to speak up." As the days passed, tensions within the police department grew. Many officers sided with Kyle, believing that he was being unfairly targeted because of his race. Others, however, supported Ryan in the investigation, recognizing the importance of holding bad actors accountable. Conversations in the break room became heated, with tempers flaring over who was truly at fault. Kyle, meanwhile, felt increasingly cornered. His partner, Officer Greg Miller, had been called in to testify about the incident. Greg was a quiet man who preferred to stay out of drama, but he couldn't ignore what he'd seen. During his interview with Internal Affairs, he reluctantly confirmed that Kyle had initiated the confrontation and used excessive force. "I didn't agree with how he handled it," Greg admitted. "It wasn't necessary." Kyle found out about Greg's testimony and confronted him angrily in the parking lot. "You sold me out," he shouted, his face red with rage. "After everything we've been through together, you stabbed me in the back." Greg held his ground, though his voice trembled. "I'm not lying, Kyle. What you did was wrong. You know it, and now everyone else knows it too." Their argument ended with Kyle storming off, leaving Greg shaken. That night, Kyle drank heavily, replaying the confrontation in his mind. He felt betrayed, not just by Greg, but by the entire system he thought he served. For the first time, doubt crept into his thoughts. Had he gone too far? Or was he simply being made a scapegoat? Back at the precinct, Ryan worked tirelessly to build a strong case against Kyle. He collaborated with forensic expert Lisa Carter, who analyzed the video footage frame by frame. Her findings revealed subtle details that reinforced Charles's innocence. For example, the fact that Charles had raised his hands defensively moments before being punched, proving he posed no threat. "This is solid evidence," Lisa told Ryan as she showed him the enhanced clips. "If we present this in court, there's no way Kyle can argue self-defense." Ryan felt a flicker of hope. "Good, because we're running out of time. Public pressure is mounting and we need to act fast." By the end of the week, Internal Affairs had compiled enough evidence to recommend disciplinary action against Kyle. However, the final decision rested with the police chief, a stern man named Harold Dawson. Known for his cautious approach, Dawson hesitated to take drastic measures without overwhelming proof. Ryan requested a meeting with him to plead his case. When Ryan entered Dawson's office, the chief greeted him with a weary expression. "Detective Johnson," he said, gesturing for Ryan to sit. "I assume you're here to discuss Officer Bennett?" "Yes, sir," Ryan replied, sitting down. "I believe we have sufficient evidence to suspend Kyle indefinitely and pursue criminal charges. Allowing him to remain on duty sends the wrong message to our officers and to the community." Dawson leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bureau desk. "I understand your position, Ryan, but you must realize this isn't just about one officer. It's about the reputation of the entire department. If we move too hastily, we risk alienating those who still support us. And if we don't move at all, we lose everyone's trust," Ryan countered. Sir, this is a chance to show that we're serious about reform. Letting Kyle walk away unpunished will undo years of progress. Dawson studied Ryan for a long moment before nodding slowly. Very well. I'll authorize the suspension and recommend prosecution, but be prepared for backlash from both sides. Relieved but aware of the challenges ahead, Ryan left the office determined to see the process through. As he walked down the hallway, he reflected on how far they'd come and how much farther they still had to go. Justice was never easy, but it was always worth fighting for. The suspension of Officer Kyle Bennett sent shockwaves through the Atlanta Police Department. News of his removal from duty spread quickly, dividing opinions among officers and civilians alike. Some believed it was a necessary step toward accountability, while others saw it as an overreaction fueled by public pressure. For Kyle, the decision felt like a betrayal, a personal attack on everything he stood for. He spent most of his days holed up in his house, glued to news reports and social media, watching as his reputation crumbled piece by piece. Meanwhile, Detective Ryan Johnson continued to push forward with the investigation. Though Kyle's suspension was a victory, Ryan knew it wasn't enough. Criminal charges needed to be filed if true justice was to be served. He worked closely with Lisa Carter, the forensic expert, to ensure every detail of the case was meticulously documented. Every frame of the video, every witness statement, and every piece of evidence had to stand up under scrutiny. Ryan couldn't afford any mistakes, not when so much was at stake. As the days passed, tensions escalated outside the precinct. Protesters led by Maria Lopez grew more vocal, demanding not only Kyle's prosecution, but also broader reforms within the police department. Their chants echoed through the streets, drawing larger crowds each day. Local businesses displayed signs in their windows showing solidarity with Charles Johnson and his family. The message was clear. The community wanted change, and they weren't going to back down until they got it. Inside the station, however, things were tense. Many officers resented Ryan for his role in Kyle's downfall. They whispered behind his back, accusing him of using his position to settle a personal score. Some even avoided speaking to him altogether. Despite the hostility, Ryan remained focused. He reminded himself that this wasn't about revenge. It was about doing what was right. Still, the isolation weighed heavily on him. One afternoon, Ryan received a call from Internal Affairs requesting an urgent meeting. When he arrived, Lisa Carter greeted him with a troubled expression. "We have a problem," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "Kyle isn't taking this lying down." "What do you mean?" Ryan asked, frowning. "He's claiming that you're biased because Charles is your father. He's trying to paint this whole thing as a vendetta, like you're manipulating the system to punish him." Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. Of course he is, but we both know that's not true. This is about holding him accountable for what he did." Lisa nodded. "I agree, but his accusations are gaining traction with some higher-ups. They're worried about how this looks internally. If we don't handle this carefully, it could undermine the entire case." Ryan clenched his fists beneath the table. "So what do we do?" "We keep moving forward," Lisa said firmly. "We focus on the facts and make sure everything is airtight, no room for doubt." Determined to stay ahead of Kyle's attempts to deflect blame, Ryan threw himself into preparing for the upcoming hearing. He reviewed witness statements, double-checked timelines, and rehearsed potential questions he might face during cross-examination. Late nights became the norm, leaving him exhausted but resolute. During this time, Ryan leaned heavily on his family for support. Charles, though still recovering emotionally, encouraged his son to keep fighting. "You're doing the right thing," he told Ryan one evening over dinner. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Jasmine chimed in, her voice filled with pride. "You're making history, Dad. People are finally paying attention because of what you're doing." Even Marcus, who usually preferred to stay out of serious conversations, offered words of encouragement. "Just don't give up," he said simply. "We've got your back." Despite their unwavering support, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. His instincts proved correct when internal affairs informed him that Kyle had refused to comply with the investigation. Instead of cooperating, Kyle barricaded himself inside his home, vowing not to surrender without a fight. The situation took a dramatic turn when SWAT was called in to handle the standoff. As fate would have it, Ryan was assigned to lead the operation. The irony wasn't lost on him or anyone else. Here he was, tasked with apprehending a fellow officer, a man whose actions had caused his own father pain. It was a surreal and deeply challenging moment, one that tested Ryan's resolve like never before. As Ryan suited up alongside his team, he reflected on the weight of the responsibility placed upon him. Leading a SWAT operation against someone within the same department felt unnatural, almost wrong. But Ryan reminded himself why he was there: to uphold justice regardless of circumstances. He couldn't let personal feelings cloud his judgment. The SWAT van rolled up to Kyle's neighborhood late at night, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Officers moved swiftly, securing the perimeter while Ryan assessed the situation. Through binoculars, he observed Kyle pacing inside his living room, visibly agitated. Lights were on, blinds drawn shut, and shadows flickered across the walls. Neighbors had been evacuated, leaving the street eerily silent except for the hum of distant generators powering floodlights. Using a megaphone, Ryan addressed Kyle directly. "Officer Bennett, this is Detective Ryan Johnson. I need you to come outside peacefully. You're surrounded and resisting will only make things worse." Kyle responded by shouting obscenities, his voice trembling with anger. "This is all your fault," he yelled. "You turned everyone against me. You think you're better than me?" Ryan took a deep breath, keeping his tone calm but firm. "This isn't about me or you. It's about following the law. Come out now and we can resolve this without further violence." For several tense minutes, there was no response. Then, suddenly, Kyle appeared at a window, clutching a handgun. "Stay back," he screamed. "I'm warning you." Ryan's heart raced, but he maintained his composure. He signaled for his team to hold their positions, knowing that rushing in could escalate the situation dangerously. Turning back to the megaphone, he tried again. "Kyle, put the weapon down. Nobody wants anyone to get hurt. Let's talk this through." Kyle hesitated, his grip tightening on the gun. Tears streamed down his face as he shouted, "You don't understand. Everyone hates me. My career is ruined because of you." "I do understand," Ryan replied, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "But holding on to anger won't fix anything. Trust me, I've been where you are. Let us help you." It was a risky move, appealing to Kyle's humanity in such a volatile moment. But Ryan knew that force alone wouldn't solve the problem. Deep down, Kyle was scared, confused, and desperate. Offering him a way out might be the only chance to avoid bloodshed. After what felt like an eternity, Kyle lowered the gun slightly. His shoulders slumped, and he sank to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Slowly, he opened the front door and stepped outside, hands raised above his head. Ryan exhaled sharply, signaling for his team to approach cautiously. Within moments, Kyle was handcuffed and taken into custody without further resistance. As Kyle was led away, Ryan watched silently, his emotions conflicted. Relief washed over him, but so did sadness. For Kyle, for his father, and for the fractured trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. This wasn't a victory. It was a step toward healing, however small. Later that night, as Ryan drove home, he replayed the events in his mind. The road ahead would undoubtedly be long and difficult, but progress had been made. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was possible, and worth fighting for. The arrest of Kyle Bennett marked a turning point in the case, but it was far from the end of the story. News of the standoff spread quickly, with media outlets covering every detail of the dramatic confrontation. The image of Ryan Johnson, a decorated SWAT commander and the son of Charles Johnson, leading the operation against a fellow officer, became the focal point of national attention. For many, it symbolized the possibility of accountability within law enforcement, a rare and powerful moment. In the days following Kyle's arrest, the Atlanta Police Department faced intense scrutiny. Protesters continued to gather outside the precinct, their numbers growing as demands for systemic reform gained momentum. Maria Lopez, the activist who had championed Charles's cause, organized rallies and community meetings to discuss tangible changes. She emphasized that while Kyle's arrest was significant, it was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. "This isn't just about one bad cop," she told the crowd during a speech. "It's about creating a system where no one has to fear being treated unfairly because of the color of their skin." Inside the department, tension simmered. Many officers still defended Kyle, claiming he was being made an example of to appease public outrage. Others, however, began to question the culture they had long accepted without challenge. Some even approached Ryan privately, expressing admiration for his courage and determination. "What you're doing takes guts," one younger officer said to him in the hallway. "I hope this leads to real change, not just for us but for everyone." Despite the mixed reactions, Ryan remained focused on the task at hand. He worked closely with Internal Affairs and the District Attorney's Office to prepare for Kyle's trial. Every document, every statement, and every piece of evidence had to be flawless. There could be no room for error, especially given the high-profile nature of the case. Ryan spent countless hours reviewing materials, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. Charles, meanwhile, continued to recover both physically and emotionally. Though the bruise on his face had faded, the emotional scars lingered. He often found himself replaying the events in his mind, wondering if there was something he could have done differently to prevent the confrontation. But his family reminded him constantly that none of this was his fault. "Dad, you didn't do anything wrong," Jasmine said one evening as they sat together in the living room. "Kyle chose to act the way he did. You were just trying to enjoy your day." Charles nodded, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. "I know," he replied softly. "But it's hard not to feel like I failed somehow, like I should have been able to stop it." "You didn't fail," Ryan interjected firmly, joining the conversation. "None of us could have predicted what happened. What matters now is making sure it doesn't happen again. To anyone." As the trial date approached, the Johnson family prepared themselves for what lay ahead. Testifying in court would be difficult, especially for Charles, who would have to relive the traumatic experience in front of strangers. But he knew it was necessary. "If telling my story helps protect someone else," he said to Ryan one night, "then I'll do it, no matter how hard it is." On the morning of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back rows, cameras clicking quietly as people filed in. Members of the community filled the seats, some wearing T-shirts printed with Charles's name and images of justice scales. Supporters from across the country had sent messages of solidarity, urging the family to stay strong. When Charles took the stand, the room fell silent. His voice trembled slightly as he recounted the events of that fateful afternoon, the music, the argument, and finally the punch that left him reeling. He described the fear and shock he felt watching Kyle lash out, not just at him, but at his entire family. As he spoke, tears welled up in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about setting an example. Kyle's defense team tried to paint Charles as confrontational and uncooperative, suggesting that he had provoked the altercation. But the viral video, along with testimonies from Marcus, Jasmine, and other witnesses, dismantled those claims. Forensic expert Lisa Carter presented her findings, highlighting key moments in the footage that proved Charles posed no threat. By the end of the prosecution's case, the jury seemed visibly moved. Kyle testified in his own defense, insisting that he had acted in self-defense and accusing Ryan of orchestrating the investigation to punish him. His arguments fell flat. However, as inconsistencies in his story became glaringly obvious, even some of his supporters began to distance themselves, realizing that his actions couldn't be justified. After days of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The wait was agonizing for the Johnson family, who gathered in the courthouse hallway, holding hands and praying silently. When the verdict was finally announced, guilty on charges of assault and misconduct, it felt like a collective exhale. Cheers erupted from the gallery, and tears streamed down faces as justice was served. Outside the courthouse, Maria Lopez addressed the cheering crowd, her voice ringing with triumph. "Today, We celebrate this victory, she declared. But tomorrow we keep fighting. For fairness, for equality, and for a world where no one has to live in fear of those sworn to protect them. For Ryan, the verdict brought a mix of relief and reflection. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey toward meaningful reform. In the weeks that followed, he collaborated with department leaders to implement new training programs, focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. Policies were updated to ensure greater transparency and accountability. While progress was slow, it was steady, and that gave Ryan hope. As life slowly returned to normal, the Johnson family found solace in small moments. Charles resumed hosting backyard gatherings, though the music stayed softer than before. Marcus joked that his grilling skills had improved under pressure, while Jasmine documented every event with her camera, determined to capture joy instead of pain. Even the younger kids laughed freely again, their carefree spirits reignited by the warmth of family unity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryan joined his father on the porch. They sat side by side, sipping lemonade and listening to the crickets chirp. For a while, neither spoke. There was no need. The silence between them carried its own weight, a shared understanding of all they had endured and overcome. Finally, Charles broke the quiet. "You know, I never thought something like this could lead to good," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But maybe it can. Maybe it already has." The months following Kyle Bennett's conviction brought significant changes to the Atlanta Police Department and the broader community. The verdict served as a wake-up call for many within law enforcement, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about bias, accountability, and trust. For Ryan Johnson and his family, it was a time of healing, but also of action. They knew that while justice had been served in this case, real change required ongoing effort. Ryan became a key figure in the department's push for reform. He worked tirelessly with internal affairs and city officials to design new training programs aimed at preventing incidents like the one involving his father. These programs focused on teaching officers how to de-escalate tense situations, recognize implicit biases, and build stronger relationships with the communities they served. Role-playing exercises were introduced, allowing officers to experience scenarios from different perspectives. Feedback sessions encouraged open dialogue between veteran cops and newer recruits. At first, resistance to these changes was strong. Some officers grumbled about political correctness or complained that the reforms made their jobs harder. But over time, attitudes began to shift. Younger officers, eager to prove themselves as guardians rather than enforcers, embraced the new approach. Even some older officers admitted privately that the training helped them see things differently. Slowly but surely, the culture of the department started to transform. Outside the precinct, the community rallied behind efforts to foster better communication with police. Maria Lopez organized regular town hall meetings where residents could voice concerns directly to department leaders. These gatherings weren't always easy. Emotions ran high and tensions occasionally flared, but they created opportunities for honest conversations. Officers attended voluntarily, listening to stories of fear, frustration, and hope. It wasn't a perfect process, but it planted seeds of understanding. Charles Johnson, though still cautious around law enforcement, played an unexpected role in bridging the gap. Invited to speak at several events, he shared his story with raw honesty, emphasizing both the pain he'd endured and the importance of moving forward together. "Holding on to anger won't fix anything," he told one crowd. "What we need is compassion, for each other, for ourselves, and for the future." His words resonated deeply, especially among younger generations who saw him as a symbol of resilience. Inspired by his courage, local schools invited Charles to talk to students about justice, forgiveness, and standing up for what's right. Marcus and Jasmine accompanied him to some of these visits, sharing their own experiences and offering advice on using social media responsibly to advocate for change. Together, they reminded people that activism didn't have to be grand gestures. It could start with small, meaningful actions. As the months passed, life for the Johnson family settled into a new rhythm. Backyard barbecues resumed, filled with laughter and music. The grandchildren returned to running wild in the yard, their earlier fears replaced by carefree joy. Charles spent more time tending to his garden, finding peace in the simple act of nurturing plants. Though scars remained both visible and invisible, they no longer defined him. Ryan, too, found balance amidst the chaos. His work consumed much of his time, but he made a conscious effort to prioritize his family. On weekends, he joined Marcus at the grill, teasing him about his world-famous burgers. He sat with Jasmine on the porch, marveling at her growing collection of photographs, capturing moments of happiness, and he spent quiet evenings talking with Charles, reflecting on how far they'd come. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the entire family gathered in the backyard. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, mingling with the aroma of grilled chicken and corn on the cob. Laughter echoed through the air, punctuated by the occasional squeal of delight from the younger kids chasing fireflies. Ryan leaned back in, his chair watching the scene unfold. Despite everything they'd been through, the fear, the anger, the uncertainty, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. This moment, ordinary yet extraordinary, reminded him why they had fought so hard. Justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It was about creating space for love, connection, and hope to thrive. Charles raised his glass of lemonade, drawing everyone's attention. "To family," he said simply, his voice warm and steady. "And to a brighter tomorrow." "To family," the others echoed, clinking glasses and cheering. Later that night, as Ryan drove home, he reflected on the road ahead. Challenges undoubtedly remained. Not every officer would embrace reform, and not every community member would trust law enforcement overnight. But progress, however incremental, was worth celebrating. Each step forward mattered, no matter how small. As he pulled into his driveway, Ryan glanced up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. They seemed endless, countless points of light shining against the vast expanse of darkness. In that moment, he realized something important. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And though the path might twist and turn, the light of hope would always guide the way.